And let's get started. So welcome to this lightning talk session. The first one, the other one is tomorrow. So today we have 5 lightning talks presented by 5 awesome speakers. And we start the session with Xavier P, who will present a minimal metaverse to teach his students about Industry 4.0. So the stage is yours, Xavier.
Okay, thank you, Jadga. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, why not? Oh, gets me an error.
I changed it to all participants. Can you try again?
Yeah, it's on one. Okay. No. So okay. I want to share all the screen. Well, I'm going to try just a presentation. Well, so you only see the slides now, I guess.
We only see you now.
Ah, not the slide?
No.
There's an error. 105035 error code.
Dan, do you know how to do that? So I clicked on advanced sharing options and then selected all participants.
Yeah, I see that same thing. All participants are able to share on my, I think it's a local error. I'm not sure I've never heard that error before.
No.
Xavier, are you on the desktop application or on the browser version?
No, desktop.
Okay, maybe you can try on the browser. You're a Linux user, right?
Okay, I try on the browser. So I get out and I get in again. Okay.
Do you want to skip Jadga and then we go to the next one?
Yeah, maybe you can try set that up and we start with the next talk. Is that okay for you, Xavier?
Yeah. No
okay, so the next talk happens to be Dan, and he's telling us about how he wants to engage students in programming and sciences by teaching them stuff about the ISS and data from the ISS.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen now, and I will, hopefully everybody can see this, and I'm going to move this out of the way. All right, so here we go. So I was contacted by, and keep time if you will, thank you. I was contacted by the director of the International Space Station Education Outreach Group, which is pretty cool. And they said, what if we partner together to write a grant to see if we can take the data that's coming out of the International Space Station, like that's streaming out continuously. What's the sensors? What's the temperature? What's the pressure? What's the food level? What's the water level? What's the urine level? All the things that they have there, they're measuring. It's really fascinating. And could we bring that to a way that students could use in an interesting way? So I immediately said, let's do this. This sounds great. And let's bring in Josh Hugg, one of our colleagues, Michael Ball, Lauren as our manager, other folks on our team to think about how we could create curriculum. So we have smc.berkeley.edu is the beginning of the website for this. We're really excited about this. And it's a whole team of folks in Berkeley, Lauren, Dan, Michael, and as well as people on the International Space Station. We're learning so much about the ISS. We also decided to create a simulation. So this is a little draft. LOAC means loss of acquisition. It means, I don't know if you knew this, but last summer, the ISS started to rotate because the Nauka Russian module, now we know what the source was, had its thrusters turned on, and it started to rotate, and they couldn't turn it off because the International Space Station had moved away from radio contact with Russia. So you had to wait till you went around the Earth again till the Russian folks could turn it off. And so literally it rotated slowly, not like it was spinning, but it's slowly, and they had to then turn it off and then thrust back. And we said, could we write a simulation for our students? So I'm presenting you a loss of acquisition simulation for all students. Let me turn off all the snap controls and see if I can get this working. Here we go. So how this works is Hit full screen, and we restart. Bloop. Okay. Welcome to the ISS Loss of Acquisition Simulator. It's spinning out of control, left and right. The goal is to stop it from rotating with its antenna pointed straight up. Different difficulty, different levels, change the initial conditions. Hit space to toggle manual versus automated. And in manual, you lose your left and right arrows to control it, and automated, you write code to control the ISS. Watch out for your fuel supply. Hit enter to begin. I'm hit enter. Now, I am going to go into manual mode here. So I wrote some code, and the code isn't working. So let me go to manual mode now. And I'm in level 1, which means it's restarting at the angle of 10 to 45. The velocity is -1. This is -1 units per second, and I have to then change it. So I'm going to choose left and right. And you see the arrow. I'm using the little image of the arrow to change it. So now I'm going to get it back to there if I can, left and right. So the kids can play. So they're going to start by playing, and the little here, it's like Lunar Lander. If you remember Lunar Lander back in the day, you're basically just doing left and right to make it stop. If you can get it just to stop, and the angle away from vertical is your score, okay? And the goal is the angle, okay? Now, there are different levels. Notice this angle is always from 10 to 45, but the velocity is always -1. If you're at level 2, the velocity is very different. Level 3, the velocity is now a fractional value, so now you can have some fractional numbers. That might be an issue. And level 4, it could be rotating to the right or rotating to the left. So there's different levels here. The goal is always the angle. So that's the simple case. But the interesting part is when you get out of this and you go into the code. Oops, go into the code. Let me, the window has changed its size. This is a really big window. Let me see if I can figure it out. This is a thrust piece of code you're going to change. And this tells you how to thrust, given the angle incoming, the velocity, and your supply. And so maybe you write some code. So this is code that says, I always want to thrust forward, which is clockwise, 0.25. So if I always turn this on, so let me go back to here and start this, and now start it. And now if I start this, enter, and I hit space, whoops, space, so not manual. Now restart this. Let's see, here we go, enter. See, it's always 0.25, but it doesn't know to stop, right? It's always thrusting on. So even though it does get to 0, it doesn't know to stop and turn itself off. So it'll do this and it won't do the right thing. So it stops and then continues to thrust until it runs out of supply voltage, supply fuel. So we can go back in here. Let me just go back, and I'm almost done. If we go back in here and change the thrust to be, what if the velocity is 0, then stop thrusting. So very simple, otherwise thrust. And that's what happens here. So here we go, and we start this, okay? And now, oh, look at that. So it now always works, but the angle isn't perfect, right? Because it stops wherever it was in the range of where you are. So the score goes from 79, 85. So you now need to think, for code, how would you factor in your angle, your thrust, your supply to get it to stop exactly at 0? Basically, you're writing Lunar Lander, but just for rotating, not for having to move left and right and all that stuff. And that's it. And then we have different challenges, as I mentioned, different levels. The last one is going to be really interesting. I'm going to add a 5th level in which if you just thrust maximum, the max thrust is 1 or -1. If you thrust maximum, you'll actually go past 0. So really, what you have to do is know to kind of go back and turn it back and woggle back and forth to do it perfectly. So there's going to be a little bit of level, and you're supposed to stop as fast as you can. So anyway, this is my demo of my lightning talk. It's the International Space Station Student Mission Control LOAC Simulator, and hopefully the students will have fun playing with it like Lunar Lander and then writing some code for it. I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan. Woo! Okay, there's heavy applause from the other room, so I think it was great. Also, we'll do questions at the end after all lightning talks, but people asked for the link to your demo, so maybe you can post it right away. What I also forgot to mention is a lightning talk takes 5-ish minutes. Since we don't have that many today, I don't have to be that strict on time. So if you talk 30 seconds longer, it's perfectly fine. But I will politely ask you to stop after 5 minutes. Except like instead of just muting you like I would do if we didn't have that much time. So next we have Glen, Monty, and Rachel and Joe with a demo of or a performance of a MIDI vibraphone in TuneScope. So The stage is yours.
Okay, Monty.
Okay, Glenn, you want me just to go ahead and do it?
Yes, do it.
All right.
Woo.
Yay, Monty, can you show the code? Share your screen and show the TuneScope code.
Sure. All right. Can you see that?
Yeah, so what's going on here is the backing track is coming from the music box, but then the MIDI interface is allowing the vibraphone. And we have a short video to kind of give you another sense of it. Can we play the one? This is from another conference where it was live. And so we're going to show just, you'll get a better sense of how they interact. Wasn't this at the Baltimore conference? And then just to give you a sense of it, we're going to show you another rendition of Night and Day. If there's, Yuan, is there time to show another 40-second clip? Okay.
You still have 2.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is
It's on the Google Chrome.
it's on the Google Chrome, Joe. We have to flip over to Google Chrome and then I guess share our screen.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, here we go. This will give you a sense of it.
Are we sharing?
Are we sharing?
Yep. Yeah, okay. Yep. One thing I think is worth pointing out here is the vibraphone in this video is an actual vibraphone, whereas the one Monty was just playing for us is a MIDI vibraphone that is being played through Snap. So we're not going through GarageBand or Ableton or anything else like that. We're patching the MIDI directly into Snap, and TuneScope is being used to provide the sound for the MIDI controller.
So Snap can be like a musical partner for these interactive types of back. This is a relatively new thing. The MIDI was pretty recent addition, so we're just beginning to play with it. And we had I think Jens and Bernat, there were some issues that they somehow did their snap magic to resolve. But we're very hopeful that this might be in the build for the release of the music library, the TuneScope music box. So so I think if there's time at the end, we'd love to, answer questions or any. Monty, do you have anything else to say wrapping up?
No, I thought that was great.
He's a taciturn fellow. And so, okay, thank you so much. And we'd love to chat with others who
thanks to you. That was great. Cool. I didn't know what to expect, but that was definitely awesome. Thanks. So, Xavier, did you try your thing? Are you ready to go?
Okay, yes. And now I'm using the browser instead of the desktop application. So let me try to share. I'm sharing now.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, in this presentation, I call Snap in a way is an Euclidean three-dimensional space, and here we combine Snap and 3JS. 3JS is a JavaScript library for dealing with 3D representation or object representation. And well, in postgraduate and studies, several engineers have forgotten concepts about programming. So we try to explain concepts from software engineering using Snap. And here is the typical representation using software engineering. Here we see classes and mechanism of inheritance. And here is a representation used in Industry 4.0 standard RAMI, that here is the notion of I40 component. And different patterns we use here is a composite for defining composite objects, proxy, which is the way to interface 3JS using Snap blocks, and facade for dealing with the subsystems or systems. Okay, well, here some ideas. If I go to, here. If I go to GitHub, and all this is available, we can try it. And here we have a launch button, and here it opens a window with 3JS viewer, and from this window it opens another window with the Snap. The two windows communicate each other using MQTT, the MQTT standard library. Okay, and right here we can see a category. It's called Minimeta here, and we have all the different blocks that have been implemented. This is an experimental environment. So here we can see different primitives, for instance, for building basic shapes, such as a cube, or cylinder, or parallel pipette. Here is a typo, it's parallel pipette, cone, and torus, and different forms. So the first thing we have to do is to enable JavaScript extensions. And here I connect to minimal Metaverse, so it connects with this site. And then the first thing I do is to show an axis to see. And here is red, green, blue. So this is the X, the Y is vertical, and the blue one. And now we can do some things. For instance, I can create a cube. I click, and now here I have a cube. If I want to reload, I just make F5, and I reload the page. Okay. Different blocks we have. Here we apply the criteria of Bertrand Meyer in his book 97, that is recommendations to use non-object-oriented languages to implement object-oriented concepts. So here, the notion of constructor are blocks that have a new as the first word, and then the methods or the operations are blocks, and the criteria is to always add a parameter of the ID of the object over we are working. This block shows if I want to create a cube, so I execute the constructor, and then I can move this object in the space. I can set different properties, color, or move. The move has coordinates and rotation. And here we can see this working. No, so and I show the axis, and here what I'm going to do is create a container. Well, a container has its own coordinate systems, and the idea of the container is you can create the container and then add objects inside the container. Objects can be simple objects or can be also container objects. So here we can see this working. So I create a container, I create a cube, and this cube is on the scene, which is the origin, the absolute coordinates. But I can add this component to the other system reference. Okay, so this cube is into the container. And then, which is interesting, question of the issues about naming. We can have relative names and absolute names. Here, if someone is interested, is the reference is an RFC from of John Postel in the 82 that explained the difference between absolute and relative names. And finally, we can execute more complex examples. For instance, as I go here, rapidly, I can execute this example. This example builds a more complex scenario. So here we have a table, and here we have a conveyor. Here we have a cube. I can, for instance, put the cube over the table. I can move this cube over the conveyor. I can start the conveyor. I can move. I can see different angles, and I can stop. So this idea of programming on these objects is taken from the building blocks, which have the source of inspiration. And finally, some features to add: improve collision detections, add measurement tools to measure angles, measure distances, improve external 3D elements loading from the step formats or something like this, better control of camera and light, and lighting and luminosity control. And that's all.
Wow. That's pretty impressive already. Looking forward to the questions later. Matthias asked, so you can prepare that for later, maybe whether you can show intersections of objects, so maybe you can talk about that a little later. Next, we have Ken, and he's presenting an AI-aided search in the Snap manual. So Ken, go ahead, present that, please.
All right, good. Hi, everybody. So let me quickly just show you. So I could, there's a speaking and there's a keyboard enter. So if I just type M, it says, what do I want to search for? And I say, changing the pen color. And notice I'm using the British spelling, which the manual doesn't do. And it should open up an HTML version of the manual and jump to what it thinks is the best sentence for matching that, which in this case looks pretty good. It's about setting the pen color to a hue. And if I wasn't happy with that, I could say, what about the next one? And it says, it does talk about set color, and you keep going, it could have up to 50 of these or something. And then whenever you want, you could return to Snap. So I mentioned that there's also this speaking interface. So if I turn on the microphone, hopefully Zoom won't interfere with this. Or I'll click here. Listening.
Hypertext to exit speech search mode.
How could I make a costume from a pen trail? Uh-oh. Oh, here it comes. Well, it didn't actually find a very good one, but it's work in progress, but it often does. And that was actually a pretty tough question for it, but it's, and I'm gonna have it stop listening to me. But the point is that the way it works is maybe the more interesting thing. So if I look here, what it does is it finds all of the sentences that are closest to the query, and it just picks the first 50 because we don't really want to see all 5,000 of them or something. And then makes sure that it's actually a reasonable one, that it's confident enough that there's a good enough match. Otherwise, it just says can't find anything. And then it really picks up the index of the sentence kind of indirectly and comes up with the sentence. So, but the way this is working is that it's relying on this this block, which says features of sentence from whatever I was querying. And here, maybe it's easier rather than show you the slide that I had to explain this. If I duplicate this and I just say, I don't know, pen color or something, it doesn't really matter what I say. It comes back with 512 numbers. And what this is using is there's this big database of 5,000 of these. Each one corresponds to a sentence in the manual. And then there's just a block that says, given the current query, which one is closest to these 5,000 fragments. And once it finds a fragment, it knows the index and it comes back with the sentence. So if anybody has a query, we could just try it right now. Any suggestions for what to ask the manual?
Does it work with the latest version of the manual? That was
Yeah, probably will in a day or two, yeah.
Okay, then not, because then I would ask about Blockify because Jens mentioned it, but you probably don't have it yet.
So just about Blockify? Well, remember, if it's just a single word, then you could always just search the manual. So you want something that's like a phrase or something a bit more complicated, or
here, Margot suggests, how can I share projects?
Okay. Actually, it's better just say sharing
project
or something, because you're trying to match a sentence. So by making it a question, you're making it a little bit further away. You could publish, unpublish, share, unshare, and delete projects from here, and it's in the middle of this. So I did a pretty good job. And then if we look for the next thing about sharing, you could open a shared project with somebody's link. So yeah, it and what I did too was I made another one of these. So this is for the manual, but I also made it for the AI guide. So if I click, I don't even need to click on it, but this is almost the same kind of code, but you say G instead of M, or you set up a different text to speech. So if I do this and I say, I don't know, finding similar sentences, because that's what I'm relying on. Maybe it'll find something in the documentation for the AI. So it is finding something related, and because it's talking about summarizing text and finding similar. Anyways, so that's the idea, and I'll be updating it in the next day or two. And the links are all in the program schedule. So that was why maybe I should explain how these 512 numbers come out from any sentence you type. And it's relying on a model that Google made called the Universal Sentence Encoder. And that in turn relies on TensorFlow.js. So I just interface to that, give it the text, and it comes back with these 512 numbers. And then to find the closest match, or the closest 50 matches, nearest neighbors of the query. Again, TensorFlow has a way of doing this incredibly quickly, because the amount of computation, if you think about it, to look through 5,000 points, each point having 512 coordinates, sorting them and finding the nearest ones is a pretty good job. But TensorFlow.js just falls back on some clever uses of the GPU, and it could do it very quickly, as we saw. So that's pretty much what I was planning to talk about. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Ken. That was pretty convincing, actually. Love it. So last up, we have Yuan Garcia, and he wants to suggest some things to help Snap's help. And as a part of the Snap team, I'm really looking forward to your suggestions, Yuan.
Thank you very much. I will screen share and we'll be on our way. Hi. Can we all see this?
Yes.
My name is Yuan Garcia, and I'm here to talking about helping Snap's help. So this is actually a really good follow-up to the person who went before me, because my last point was that we actually didn't have any references to the 155-page documentation manual in Snap. So very glad that we both came to the same conclusion aside from each other. So just the minor things. For the help screens in the drop-down menus or functions, like for instance, square root and all that, you actually can see that there isn't any help for the different ones. So you can only see square root. There isn't any help for the other mathematical functions, just one small thing. And another thing is that the help screen from the numbers from blank to blank says that the range has to be ascending here. It says it there, but it actually doesn't anymore. That was from earlier. So those are just some minor things. But there also isn't any support for the different languages for the help screen. And you can see that here in this, where I switched to Chinese, but the help is still in English. So I propose a different way to do help, where you can just use Google Translate or whatever auto translate to have it be so that we can have these different language helps. Or an alternate version would be, instead of what you can see here, where there are pictures and then words next to them, we can have a picture, and then you can see that there's actually an animation. So instead of having pictures and then a words, it could be pictures and then an animation of what they do. As you can see, there's 2 videos of the like showing what they do. So this could transcend the language barrier that would make the point before moot, or even add closed captioning that could be done in separate languages. Also, libraries. So when you look at a library, you can see that it has a sentence max, or a few sentences. I think the most one is for iteration and composition, where the explaining the whole thing, it just says some standard functions on list, or it doesn't give a very thorough explanation. So I think that maybe we could put in a link to a video of, we don't have that many libraries, of just like a 30-second explanation of what these would do. And I think that would be much more beneficial instead of just a sentence. Also, and this is just to the side, we could have this little paperclip thing where it would be a recommendation. So you would actually have the next to the utility, you click him, and then you would they would show you whatever the link to the help would be. And also, people who found this library useful may also want to try blank or blank. And this isn't just constrained to libraries. This little paperclip guy could also be put in next to like higher order functions, for example. So you could have the paperclip next to, say, someone who's never used map, keep, or combine, just trying out with map. And the paperclip could say, you know, maybe you want to try keep or combine. They do similar things as another higher order function. And the last one is that in Snap, there aren't any references to the actual large documentation manual, which actually the talk before me was about. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your talk. Jens kind of seems to buy in on the idea of Clippy. He wants blocky now. I'm not sure about that, but I think I agree with most of the other things. So audience, we now open up for your questions to all of the speakers and all of the Ignite talks, lightning talks, and thanks for presenting them again.
I wanted to make a point about Clippy because it got terrible reviews. It was hated by anybody that knew how to do anything. But at the same time that was happening, I saw real beginners or a young child that was really using Clippy very effectively and very much enjoying it. The problem I think Clippy had was that it was kind of insulting to anybody that had even a moderate level of expertise. But it really was, I saw it being useful for people that were real beginners.
Oh, I forgot to mention this, but I would actually have Clippy be toggleable. So because earlier in the word Clippy, you couldn't turn Clippy off, or it was arduous and you had to install different things. But for this one, it could just be a simple settings and then turn off. So I think that would remove a bit of the frustration for the more experienced coders.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree on the help screen. So maybe we need to revisit that with the new blocks features, so we can actually have script picks that we can drag out. And so Bernard and I were suggesting the same thing. So maybe that's something that we can investigate.
And many of
well,
us...
actually,
go ahead, Bernard.
I was saying that actually in the help screens, we could have blocks. We don't need picks anymore. We could have the actual blocks, and those would automatically get translated when you switch languages, because they would be blocks.
I was thinking, I fondly remember the tool sprite that came with an earlier version of BYOB that would actually load examples of how to use it. And I think we saw that earlier today where there was an example of how to use one of the blocks with it. You'd have to open it up and say examples, but having kind of either a sprite that has all the examples with lots of comments of how to do it would be really useful. If you load this huge library, you have no idea what that new abstract data type is and how to use them. So having examples would be really great for all the libraries.
Any more questions or comments? You can also write them in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. Okay, so yeah, Glen made a comment. So all of the projects that don't exceed 10 megabytes of file size, because we then can't upload them to the cloud, will be added to the SnapCon carousel on the Snap page. So you can then check out all the projects again.
Jadga, we can actually send you direct links to our YouTube page if you just want to link to those, and then you don't have to worry about file sizes and uploads and all of that.
Right.
And we can also, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the other coding environments that do music do have libraries, and we think they're incredibly useful. However, we wanted to make sure that once Jens finalizes the format, then we could start building out the library. We had thought that there might be changes in format, and we didn't want to build up a lot of examples that would break But just as soon as it's in final format, then we will start adding building a library of examples. And we're hoping that the Snap community will also contribute.
I will. I want to check it out. So I went to your workshop this morning and I will definitely check it out later. Thomas just shared a link in the chat. He has a student who created an interface for integrating samples into Snap. So if you're interested, check that out as well. So we have 15 more minutes. If you have any questions or comments, let us know. If not, we might extend the next break.
I have a question for Ken, which is how did you code the manual? And if I wanted to take a favorite book, how would I do that so I could have somebody ask questions about it?
You're on mute, Ken.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you unmuted me. You can hear me now, right? Yeah. So I found a free tool that would convert the PDF to HTML with actually some nice little search features in itself. Then just in JavaScript, you could get what's called the inner text, which is just the text without any formatting or any thing of that sort. And then I had to write a little program to just pull apart the sentences, which you would think you could just, look for period space or question mark space. But, there's lists where it'll say the first, number 1 period, X, number 2, whatever. It'd be a little more complicated. But once you've got a list of all your sentences, you import them into Snap. There's a single block I have called, features of sentences that will just turn all those into these, what are called embeddings, 512 numbers for each sentence. And then there's a block that'll find the closest one. So then you're not really answering the question as much as finding the sentence that's the closest to what somebody has typed, which could often be an answer to a question, but it's not quite question answering. I have a block for question answering, and it works fine for like the Wikipedia information for Snap, because that's, a few hundred words or so. And you could just ask, who developed Snap, and it'll answer it. But when it's much longer, it's much more difficult to deal with that, or it's ridiculously slow and not useful. Yeah, but people can take the sprite I showed and make it for their own texts or databases. But again, what you're really finding is what sentence in the text is closest to the one that is in the query.
So I have a question either for Ken or one of the other geniuses on the conference call. We thought that once we have the final format of the music blocks, a nice thing to do would be to have a translation from some other format like music XML. And the reason we like music XML is a human can read it. But as always, what I'm wondering is, does that seem like that would be a daunting task, or would it be something that would, and I know without getting into it, you might not know for sure, but what would be your estimation of how challenging it might be to move things from a MIDI or a music XML library into Snap format?
Yeah, so one possibility, and maybe there's others that know more about this, would be there's probably some JavaScript library that could read in this music markup language and turn it into a JavaScript data structure. And then that data structure could be turned into JSON, and then Snap could read the JSON, so that there's a couple steps, but it doesn't mean that there's very much custom programming, assuming there is a library that could read this format into JavaScript.
Well, we actually explored, going directly into Snap because it's just an XML file. And what we like is the idea of giving the user control, so that if they didn't like the way it worked in Snap, they could just change. That was what was attractive about having a direct, converting the music XML blocks into Snap. But I guess it would be fine if it went through some intermediary, is like JavaScript. But
I mean, I agree that there's many advantages to doing purely in Snap, but I'm just guessing. I don't know how complicated the format is. That it's a fairly big task. Maybe somebody else knows.
MIDI is pretty complicated because it comes from the analog era, but music XML is more straightforward. And so, although we have found that, just like your example of getting the sentence fragments, there's always these ambiguities where the specification doesn't completely define it. But once we get the final format in as a library, then that looks to us like that would be a very useful thing to look into, and maybe we could call on people that have the expertise like you and others have when we get to that point.
Yeah, I'm happy to give my advice, but I'm not really an expert on dealing with XML formats. By the way, Michael seems to have answered also in the chat. So.
Can you talk, Michael? If not, I just read it out loud. So Michael suggested that with the meta programming feature, you could probably map an XML to a set of blocks, and you would still need something to pass the XML into a snap list or a similar structure, but that shouldn't be difficult. Also, Andreas very interested in using your feature, Ken, in the turtle stitch help.
Yeah, people that do use it, please let me know, how it goes, or if you have problems.
And also, Ramon was very excited to try it out with the class. Okie dokie. Any more questions?
Yeah.
If not, I guess, sorry. Okay, then if not, thanks to our presenters, and I think we can end this 5 minutes early, and we'll see you again in 20 minutes, I think. That's noon Pacific time and 9 p.m. in Central Europe for 2 panels and 1 workshop from Georgia, from Australia. And I hope many of you join. And thanks for participating in this session. We'll see you around, hopefully.
Thanks so much.
Bye.